Hey guys, welcome back to our channel Glitched Velocity. I'm your host Wazahat, and today in this video I'm going to show you how to apply screen shaders to your CopperCube game or CopperCube project. And this video is going to be really interesting because you can also use the same extension to create post effects or screen transition by extending the source code. And right now this shader or the extension allows you to change some basic properties like brightness, contrast, gamma, saturation, hue, vibrance, and allows you to tint the screen. And you can also use CRT effect, which is a old TV effect. And if you're interested, you can go to my 𝙎𝙪𝙧𝙘𝙝 page and download the extension. Once you have downloaded it and installed the extension to your computer, it is a little bit difficult to set up it. So I'm gonna show you how to set up it properly. And yeah, this video is basically how to use this extension. So as you can see, I have two files on my desktop here, which is 𝙎𝙪𝙧𝙘𝙝 and 𝙎𝙪𝙧𝙘𝙝. So I'm gonna delete the exe file because it is just, is simply the published application from this 𝙎𝙪𝙧𝙘𝙝 file. I'm gonna open this template file, and we have the basic terrain example here. And in order to show you, or in order to prevent making this video complicated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply delete the directional light and the terrain and rest of the useless things like cube mesh and blue skybox and this animated man mesh. And now we are here with the camera, which is a first person shooter camera, and a plane mesh, which is children for this first person shooter camera. And the material for this plane mesh is transparent add, and we are using a black texture so that it will be completely transparent. So the basic idea is we are going to create a plane mesh that will stay on the screen or in the front of the camera as the game runs. So it will always be in the front of the camera. And we are going to use it as a RTT, which is render to target texture. And then on that texture, we are going to apply the shaders. So what we are going to do is we are creating a plane mesh and then simply apply the shader action to this plane mesh. But we have to be very careful when we are creating this plane mesh. And why we have to be very careful? Because there are some parameters or there are some magic numbers that we have to use in order to make it always stay in front of the camera and in order to make it always fit to the screen. So I'm going to show you how you can create the plane mesh. So right now we have this plane mesh, and I'm not going to delete it because it uses some magic numbers. Instead, I'm going to create a duplicate mesh with the same properties or same parameters I have used for this plane mesh. So first we need to make sure that we are using tile count 1 for our plane mesh. This is a very critical value, so you have to be very precise with it. You need to use 1 for the tile count. You always need to use 1 for the tile count. Then we can specify width and length. You can use whatever width and length that you want to use, but I will suggest you go with the 1 and 1 here. Then simply create the plane mesh and then make it a children of your FPS or third person or whatever active camera you have in your scene. Right now I have this FPS camera as the active camera. So I made it a children of my FPS camera, and then simply go to the position of this plane mesh and change it to 0.0.0 so that you don't have a confusion here. And now we are going to play with the magical values here. So if I test the application now by pressing this play button here, and let me just change some settings here in the publishing settings, because it is now using full screen and we don't want to use full screen, because whenever I use full screen, my screen recording software just completely black out the screen in the video. So I'm not going to use full screen. So if I test the application now, you can see we are not having anything here. So our plane mesh is not rendering in front of our camera, and we want our plane mesh to always stay in front of our camera. And how I can do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply make the Z position 2.0. So The position for my plane mesh will be 2.0. And now if I test the application, we are still not able to see anything. And that's because we need to change the rotation on the x-axis of our plane mesh. We want our plane mesh to be minus 90 on the x-axis. And now if I test the application, then you will notice our plane mesh is appearing in front of our camera, and it will always gonna be rendering in front of our camera. It doesn't matter if you are using FPS camera or third person camera, it is gonna render in front of our camera. And we want that for our plane mesh. And now let's just add the terrain back so that we can see whenever we move our camera, our plane mesh is going to be in front of our camera. Now comes the scaling part. So we want our plane mesh to cover the full screen. We want our plane mesh to cover the full width of the viewport or the window. So how to do that? And we also want that whatever the resolution of our window, it should not affect the scale of the plane mesh. So if you are going to use, right now it uses like 800 by 600, but if you are going to use like 1920 by 1080p, then it should not affect the scale of the plane mesh. And what we are going to do is we are going to precisely scale our plane mesh to a magical value or magic numbers. And that is, I think 5.18 and maybe 2.9 or 3.9, 2.91, I think, 91. And we can check it with our plane mesh. Yeah, we have 5.18 and 2.91 for our plane mesh one. So we are going to use the same value here for the scale. But wait, I did make changes to this one, right? So let me just copy it from here and paste it here. So now we have this magical values here, 5.18 for the x-axis and 2.91 for the z-axis. And now if I test the application, then our plane mesh should be scaled through the screen. So now you can see our plane mesh is completely fit in the screen of our window. And now it doesn't matter if I use something else for the resolution, Windows resolution or Windows width, like 1920 by 1080 here. It doesn't matter if I use something like that. It will still be gonna be rendered or fit in the screen. So yeah, that's how you need to create your plane mesh and make it a children for your camera. And the next thing that you have to do is make sure that your plane mesh has a black material or transparent material. I'm gonna use black with a transparent add. You can also use transparent alpha channel with the actual transparent texture. Now if I render, nothing happens, but our game runs perfectly fine. And let me just tell you one more thing before. Let me just check it so that, yeah. So I just undo the things and we have this default texture material applied to our plane mesh 2. And in order to make this magical values work, which is 5.18, 2.91, and the rotation and position values, you need to make sure that your camera aspect ratio is 16:9. I haven't made these magical values for 4:3 or auto screen resolution, but I'm using 16:9. So if you don't use this 16:9 for your aspect ratio for your camera, your active camera, like if it is a third person camera or first person camera, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure that you are using 16:9. If you want to use something else, then you have to adjust these values according to yourself as per your scene. So for example, if it will still work, but your game will be zoomed in. So if I use 4:3, then you will notice that our texture will be cropped. So now it is not fitting completely in the screen. So you can see, let me just quickly change, make it 800 by 600 again, that it will be much easier for you to See the changes here. This, and if I test the application, now you can see it is not completely fitting in this, window. And if I change the aspect ratio back to 16:9, and if I test the application, you will see that this is now completely fitting in the screen. And if we use something else, then it will be cropped in or zoomed out. If I use like a 62 ratio 3, 2.35 ratio 1, then it will be something else. So it won't fit the screen. You need to scale according to your aspect ratio. So now it is not completely scaling or fitting to the screen. So you need to make sure that your camera aspect ratio is 16:9. Otherwise, you have to deal with it yourself, and you have to check out what will be the magical values for your aspect ratio. So it is wiser to use 16:9 because that's probably all the computers, monitors, and all the stuff uses all the time. So yeah, that's all about the creation of the plane mesh. So this was the complicated part, and now we are ready to go for the easiest part, which is the uses of the extension. All you have to do is go to the root scene node and apply before first drawing do something behavior, and into that behavior I'm going to remove the already attached action. You have to attach this action which you have downloaded from 𝙎𝙪𝙧𝙘𝙝 page. It will be named as Screen Shader version 1.0. If you have installed it correctly, then it should show up here. Simply select it, then you will be provided with bunch of different properties and options here, like OpenGL. We have the first option, OpenGL, and what it will do is you need to check it if you are using OpenGL renderer for your game, and if you are using direct 3D renderer for your game, then you have to uncheck it. For example, if I go to the publishing settings here for my Windows exe, then you will see I'm using OpenGL as my 3D video driver. So if you are using direct 3D, then you have to uncheck that option. If you are using OpenGL, then you have to check that option. So I'm going to check it, and then we have to select the affecting node. And for the affecting node, we are going to use the plane mesh that we have made children to our FPS camera or whatever active camera we have. And then we will be provided with bunch of default values for our brightness, contrast, gamma, hue, saturation, vibrance, and an option to tint the screen with a color and CRT effect. So now if I test the application without any changed values, then it will play with the default values. You can see we have this. Let me just add a animated sleepwalker or something like that. Animated man here. Here. Up. Now test the application. It will be same usual game. And now the best part comes. You can change or alter the values we have provided in our extension. So if I go to behavior first drawing do something, and before first drawing do something, and then we can change the brightness of our game, we can change the contrast of our game, we can change the gamma correction, we can change hue, saturation, and vibrance. Let's just change the saturation. For example, we want it to be a bit more colorful. So let me just add 3 here. And now you can see this is what the game looks like. And if let me just add a skybox as well, that we can see it much more beautifully. We have a skybox, and this is how the actual game looks like. And when I press this play button, then you notice how colorful the game is. It is way more colorful and more vibrant or saturated than the color of this original game or original CopperCube application. And the best part is it always works with the camera. If you rotate the camera, it will still work, and the shader is applied to the whole screen. So that's why I named them screen shaders instead of just shader thing. And you can change them during runtime as well. You can change the properties or parameters during runtime with the help of variables. So if you look at this root scene node, we already have a when a key is pressed do something behavior attached, and the key pressed is F. And what I'm doing is I'm simply changing a variable. Like I'm changing the screen shader saturation to 3, and you can change it to something like screen shader dot hue to 3, and it will simply change the hue whenever we press F. So right now the game started with the, you know, highly saturated colors, and if I press F, then the hue of this view or the screen game screen should change. So if I press F, then you can see our sky becomes pink and our terrain becomes blue. So the whole game's hue is changed, and we can make it something like 0.3 so that it will be more greenish like that. And it now by pressing F, it is something like more greenish. So the hue values range from 0 to 360 because it is based on rotation, I think, hue rotation. Yeah. So now it looks much more more vibrant with the green hue and all those stuff. You can also apply, CRT effect, and I'm going to show you how I added this and how you can also extend this shader action with anything. I mean, there are infinite amount of possibilities with this extension or with this method of using RTT texture or render to texture API with a plane mesh to apply screen shaders. Like now you can see this CRT effect. Let me just change the resolution a bit so that we can a bit more like the screen. 1920 by 800. It is a really good, not 800, like 80, 1080. And it is a really good, CRT effect because it is animated and it has these vignette effect, and there is some sort of curvature. It is curved at the borders. If you look at the borders, it is curved, and the CRT scan lines are animated. These are animated, and if you want to control the speed of animation or these animated lines values, then you can simply go to the source code of the shader action, and then all you have to do is look at this CCB set shader constant I time, and then simply add divided by 2 so that it will be much slower. And if we test it, then you will notice that the lines are now slowly animating or slowly moving upward and downward. And if I change it back to I time, which is just interference time or the frames per second time, I think each frame I'm incrementing a value, and I call that I, I time. This is how it looks like. And if you want to use your own, shaders thing or stuff like your custom transitions or other things, then you can simply go to this website like Shader Toy. It is really good website with hundreds and thousands of shaders available, and you can simply search for your query like CRT and then simply search it. And I think I already have this query here. So you will be provided with bunch of different options. And if you see this first one, this is what I used for the uh, CRT texture. So let me just pause it. And you can see these are the scan lines, and this is how exactly the same CRT effect that we have seen in the CopperCube shader extension. If I scroll down here, then you can see we have this CRT effects, curvature, vignette, scan lines, and CRT grill. And we have some functions here: CRT curve, UV, draw vignette, draw scan line. And if you look at the source code, then you will notice I have used the same thing here. So we have CRT curve, UV, draw vignette, draw scan lines, and all the CRT effect here. So it is an old television CRT television effect that you can apply to your screen or in your CopperCube. Just like that, all you have to do is simply copy paste this stuff and translate them to your CopperCube stuff. Like if it is using float, then you can use vec4 and something like that. So it won't be hard for you. I think most of the users will be able to copy paste some stuff from Shader Toy. So there are a bunch of different shaders from Shader Toy that you can use. Like you can use this VCR distortion effect, or you can use this effect as well. There are a bunch of different options that you can use. And let me just like transitions here, so that you can use so many transitions effects as well. And I think, yeah, you can use this as well, but then you have to use dual, rendering target or something like that, and this as well. Then you can browse through the pages. There are so many, literally so many transition effects. Like, it has 38 plus video transitions. You can use this, and wow, you can simply do this in your CopperCube game. Like, you can see that there are so many effects, type 11, type 13, and they are really easy to translate to DirectX and GLSL. So you can use all these effects in your CopperCube game. All you have to do is simply copy paste them as a JavaScript string in your shader code, and you're good to go. So this is how it is, you know, internally technically developed. And if you don't want to use this and simply want to use the basic features that comes with the built-in shader action, then you can also use them. So right now I have already showed you some of these, like saturation thing and the vibe. Now I'm gonna guide you through all these properties. Like, brightness will increase the actual brightness of your screen. It ranges from 0 to 1. So 1 means totally bright and 0 means no brightness. I think it ranges from -1 to 1. Maybe let me just check it. I don't remember. So yeah, it ranges from -1 to 1. So you can change it to -1, then it will be totally dark. I think nothing will render. Yeah, nothing will render. And if you change it to 1, then it will be totally white, I think. So everything will be totally white or blown out. So it is not totally white, but the brightness has been significantly increased, because maybe we are using some sort of saturation. But you can change it something like 10, because the ranges are just there to showcase how it works. Like, so now it is completely blown out. So you can change the brightness, and the default value is 0 for the brightness. And then you can also change the contrast as well. And there are few differences, that if you are using the OpenGL thing, then there is some sort of differences in the contrast and brightness and all those stuff, because they both uses different color space. For example, DirectX already uses sRGB color space, I think, gamma corrected color values, but OpenGL doesn't uses it. So you will see some visual differences between OpenGL and DirectX shader. So if I go to DirectX renderer, so if I go to publishing settings and change my 3D video driver to Direct 3D, and then get back to this before first trying to do something, and uncheck this OpenGL option. If you don't uncheck it, then you will be able to see the flipped version, or you won't able to see anything in the screen or like that. Then you have to make sure that you have this direct 3D, you have this unchecked. And we have affecting node, which is plane mesh 1. Then we have 0 brightness and saturation as 3. And just make it back to 1, so that it will be default values at it default value. Then we have CRT effect, and we are using these things. So now let's just step. And we have the CRT effect, but we are not able to see the terrain now. And that's, I think, is a bug or something like that. And if I go to the publishing settings, Windows EXE, and if I change it to full screen, then it should work, because how it is supposed to work with the Direct 3D. That's a minute error or something like bug. I don't know. But it works with all the other things except the, terrain. I don't know why it doesn't render the terrain. Maybe this is a glitch or bug in the game file. So if I go back here and change the values here, I'm not gonna use full screen, but I'm gonna use 800 by 600 here. for the direct 3D, and if I test it, it should work. Yeah, it is working now. So this there is probably something wrong with the values of the screen resolution or full screen resolution. So it works now. There is a glitch or bug, but now it works. And if I press F, the hue changed to 0.3, and that's good. But then we have this brightness value, and if you change it to 1, just to check out if it works differently. And now we are seeing the same result as of the OpenGL, I think, but we have this contrast value that's I'm pretty sure has something different than the OpenGL value. So I'm gonna simply disable the CRT effect as well, and then I'm gonna increase the contrast to something like 3. In DirectX, I think there is some sort of blue tint for the contrast. So yeah, you can see it has this blue tint. You can see the blue color in the highly contrasted areas. And let me just use 1.3 instead of 3. Now you can see we have these contrast in the shaded areas or these areas, and they have some sort of blue tint to them. But when I use OpenGL, if I check it, OpenGL, and switch my renderer to OpenGL as well, then you will notice it has no blue tint and everything is completely black. So the darker areas or the highly contrasted areas are totally black. There is no tint of blue or something like that. There is no gamma correction here because of the color space. Both OpenGL and DirectX uses different color space. So that is why you might be able to see some differences when using OpenGL and Direct 3D renderer. But the extension works with both as OpenGL as well as DirectX, and it works really great. So you can create some properties for user interface properties and all those stuff for your games, and allow the users to change those parameters for their game based on the variables, because it allows you to use the variables as well. You can use screen shader dot saturation, screen shader dot brightness, screen shader dot vibrance. Now let me just get back to the properties here. So we have seen the brightness, we have seen the contrast. I have already told you what the contrast will do. It will simply increase the contrast or make the darker areas more dark in your game. This ranges from, I think, 1 to above, I think. So 0.0 and above. And most of the settings are 0.0 and above. And you can try using minus negative values as well. I don't think it will affect anything, or it will simply do some worse effect. So yeah, it makes it like it goes negative or something like that. But you can use negative values as well. So that's up to you. How do you want to play with this? Then we have gamma correction. It will simply there to correct the gamma values, and you can use like 3. Then it will make everything go some sort of, it will fade or add an overlay, like white overlay to the screen. Now you can see everything has been changed with blown out white overlay things. So these are the gamma correction values. You can change the brightness along with the gamma, and then you can also change the hue. I have already shown you that hue is from 0 to 360. You can change it, and they all are in the floating point value. So you need to use points here like 0.1, 0.2. So they are floating point values and not integers. You can change the saturation. It will increase the color amount or all those stuff and make your scene highly saturated. And if you use 0 here, then it will make your scene goes completely grayscale or black and white. You can see now it is completely black and white. And yeah, that's how you can use post effects or something like that. So if you go to the scenes here and switch to scene post effects, then we have black and white, invert, and colorize and vignette effect. You can do all sort of these effects with this shader extension. You can extend the shader according to yourself and then add those effects. There is already a vignette effect. If you see the CRT effect, then there is already vignette effect there. So you can simply go to CRT effect, and if you want to increase the vignette, then simply go to the shader. And as I said, we are using direct 3D, so you have to check we are dealing with a direct 3D here, which is in HLSL language. So let's get to the draw vignette part here and simply change this value 0.3 to something else. Like I'm gonna change it to 2 so that it will cover much more area. I test the application now, and you will see it is much more, vignette is much more in the area. So let me just change the hue saturation back to that we can see the color. Now vignette is affecting more area, and you might not be able to see it. Let me just make it 20 so that you can see it much more better. Well, it should work, but I am not sure why it's not working anymore. We're doing the right thing now. Let me just check. We are doing, yeah, we are doing the right. We are doing it again. So why the vignette is not working? We are changing action shader GIC screen space version 1.0. It is fine. Right, direct, because there are many versions I have created before creating the final version. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And we have 0.3 value here, vignette, and 13. It should work. I'm not sure why it is not. Let me just try it with the OpenGL thing here. Because sometimes, things works in OpenGL and sometimes it doesn't work in DirectX. So let me just simply change it to, so we are using OpenGL already, and we are changing it in the DirectX. That makes sense. That makes sense. We don't have to change it in the DirectX, so we have to change it in the OpenGL. So we are already using OpenGL, and now let's just test it. The vignette effect should cover the more screen. So you can see now it is covering the whole screen, and you can change it to something like 2, and it will be bit, so it is now not covering that much effect. And let's just change it back to 0.3. And previously it was not working because we are changing it here in the DirectX part, not in the OpenGL part, while we have selected OpenGL as our renderer. So that makes sense. And you can also change different things like the animation time, as I have all. For the eye time, you can change it here in the CCB set shader constant. You can simply divide the eye time by 2 to make the animation a bit slower and all those stuff. Then you can also apply a tint, like I can change it to something like blue, light blue color, like this. And let me just turn off the CRT effect so that we can see it much better. We have this blue tint for our screen. You can create so many things with this extension. I specifically created it for those people who used to create horror games in with the help of CopperCube, like Niven and Victor, who creates horror games, because there are so many complaints by the players that the brightness is really low or brightness is much higher or like those issues. So you can clearly use provide options to your users, like you can provide a slider for, or text editor for the values of the brightness. They can enter the values and simply set the variable based on those values, and so that they can adjust the brightness and hue and other stuff by themselves. And yeah, there is this CRT effect as well, so that you don't have to rely on the third party injectors like Reshade or SweetFX or JuiceFX. Like those, you can already implement your own shaders with the use of shader toy and all those stuff. There are tons of shaders in the shader toy. You can simply go ahead and browse, and you can use whatever shader you think you want in your game, and yeah, they will simply work for you. But remember that they are not geometry shaders; they are simply screen shaders, like CRT effect or noise or all those stuff. Mm, they are for your CopperCube OpenGL or GLSL or HLSL version. Otherwise, they won't work, or you will get some errors like implicit multiplication of vector type or some other errors. And you need to translate them according to yourself, according to your knowledge or experience with these shader writing stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. You can do a lot of stuff with the screen shaders. And there are some things that tell you, but I don't remember right now what those things that I want to talk about. I totally forgot. So that's pretty much about it. You can do whatever you want. Make sure that you are using the correct renderer and the correct values here, and the perfectly aligned plane mesh. So yeah, I remember. If you are using the simple camera, then your so if I remove this first person shooter style camera behavior from this um, FPS camera, then if I test the application, then it should not work. You can see it is rendering the plane mesh here. So in order to use the simple camera, you need to make sure that your camera target is pointing at the center of this plane mesh. And how we can do that? We need to manually align our camera target to this plane mesh. So it is much better if you simply change the target value 0 and then something like 10 on the z axis. Right? It work. Is not working, and where our plane mesh is. So we have our plane mesh here, and then we can simply change it to solid that we can see the plane mesh. And you need to make sure that your material is, I'm not sure if I'm applying to the right. You need to make sure that your material is double-sided material. And if you go to edit and delete properties, I remember now that what I have to do. You have to make sure that there is no bilinear or trilinear filter applied to plane mesh that you are going to use for the RTT or for the shader. Otherwise, it will blur out or it won't give that highly sharp image to you. You can use the bilinear filter if you want, but I don't recommend it. But if you want, you can use that. And now if we look here for the camera target, and there is an issue here. And the camera target, the issue is that we need to use the same value for the position of our camera. And now we need to increase the z axis for our camera target. And right now it is 64, so I'm going to make it 70. Now if I render it, then it should render the scene correctly. And now you can use whatever whatever custom camera behavior that you want to use, like 2D player controller or 2D RTS camera, 2D top-down shooter camera. I'm talking about my camera. As you know, I have created that camera extension. So you can use that with the simple camera. So in order to use the simple camera, make sure that your camera target is aligned with the plane mesh so that it will work just fine with the plane mesh. Otherwise, you can simply assign the FPS camera where it is, go to behaviors for the camera, and first person shooter style camera, run the game, and it will And yeah, you need to make sure a lot of different things, like you have to make sure that there is no collision for your plane mesh as well. And gonna be active camera, but I don't know why the first person style shooter control is not working. Able to move my camera. Oh, I understand, because I it now. Now I think that's all about it, and you can apply a lot of effects. And let me just quickly change it one more time with the vibrance, because I want to tell you about vibrance. Vibrance is something similar to saturation, but it is not saturation. And why I'm saying this, because it is not saturation. It won't change the saturation or for all the object. It will only change for low saturated objects in your game. It will change the saturation or add vibrance or make it colorful to only those objects that have less saturation, or those texture or color values that has less luminance. So if I make it like 3, then it won't give the same result as the saturation. Okay. So it is much more colorful, but it won't saturate the whole game or whole things. So if there is already highly saturated object, it will skip those objects, and or you can say the color values. Or if I change it to, like, we are changing the uh, s- screen shader vibrance to something like 3 here, and let me just change the vibrance to 1 back here, or 0, and change the saturation to 3, so you can see the difference between those. So this is how the highly saturated or saturation looks like. But look how it changes to less saturated when I press F, or it will change it back, change it to vibrance. But you will also see the saturation because it is already applied to it. So you won't see the major changes, but it will. Let's just see, because we have to make saturation back to 1 here, or otherwise it won't work. So we have to set another variable, like set or change variable, and we want to set the screen shader dot saturation to 1, so that it will be back to the normal saturated. Now if I test the application, and now if I press F, then it will go back to the default saturation, but with vibrance, with the value increased by 3. So if I press F now, then you will see it is still a bit saturated, but with the vibrance. So it is still colorful. You can see it is much more colorful, or way more colorful than the default, original color of the screen. So, so yeah, and I think now we have to conclude the video, or be the time for the outro. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and if you are new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. And as always, you can download the extension my h.io page, along with some other extension that I have just recently tried reposting from neophyte.cf to, you know glitched velocity 𝙎𝙪 page. And I think I'm using the old link here, so I'm gonna update it here. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. See you in the next video. Till then, bye bye, hasta la vista, take care.